Have you ever felt that something was off about where you live? That crawling sensation on the back of your neck when you're alone, telling you that maybe, just maybe, you're not really alone at all. For Mike, it started with a song. A gentle lullaby floating through his wall at 3 a.m. The wall that separated his apartment from Unit 6B. The unit that was supposed to be empty. Mike had moved into Westbrook Apartments because the rent was dirt cheap. The landlord, Mr. Peterson, was a gruff man who barely made eye contact during the tour. "It's quiet here," he'd said, handing over the keys to 6A. "Keep to yourself, pay on time, we'll get along fine." Mike noticed how Mr. Peterson's eyes darted nervously to the door next to his. "What about 6B?" Mike had asked. Peterson's reply was curt, "Unoccupied, has been for years." The first few nights were uneventful. Mike spent his days unpacking, and his evenings crashed out in front of his second-hand TV. On the fourth night, he woke suddenly at 3 a.m. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow of his digital alarm clock. And that's when he heard it. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, singing a lullaby through the wall. The wall he shared with empty Unit 6B. "Rock-a-bye baby" on the treetop. The voice was clear, but somehow distant, as if reaching him through more than just plaster and paint. Mike told himself it was just thin walls. Maybe 6B wasn't empty after all. Maybe Peterson had rented it out without mentioning it. But night after night, always at 3 a.m., the singing continued. Always lullabies. Always in that same soft, soothing voice. Mike started pressing his ear to the wall. The singing seemed to come from the exact same spot each time. He began to notice other things too, like how the building seemed to grow colder around 3 a.m., regardless of his thermostat settings. And how sometimes, when the singing stopped, he could hear what sounded like the gentle creaking of a rocking chair. After 2 weeks, Mike couldn't take it anymore. The curiosity was eating him alive. Who was singing? Why always at 3 a.m.? And why did the landlord claim the unit was empty? One night, he worked up the courage to step outside his apartment at 2:55 a.m. The hallway was silent and dimly lit by flickering bulbs. He stood before the door to 6B, heart pounding in his chest. The door looked exactly like his own, except the metal numbers were slightly tarnished, as if they hadn't been touched in years. Mike checked his watch, 3 a.m. exactly. Right on cue, the singing began, muffled but unmistakable behind the door. Before he could second-guess himself, Mike raised his fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps on the door of Unit 6B. The singing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that feels heavy, pressing against your eardrums. Mike stood frozen, suddenly aware of how foolish this might be. What was he expecting? But then, after what felt like an eternity, he heard movement inside. A soft shuffling. And then a voice, different from the singing, raspier closer to the door, whispered through the wood, "Don't wake the baby." Mike stumbled backward, ice flooding his veins. He didn't remember returning to his apartment. He didn't remember locking his door, or pushing his dresser against it, or wrapping himself in blankets even though he was sweating. "Don't wake the baby." The words echoed in his mind as dawn finally broke. There was no baby in 6B. There couldn't be. Peterson said the unit was empty. Had been for years. Mike called in sick to work and waited for a decent hour to confront his landlord. By 9 a.m., he was pounding on Peterson's office door, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes wild from lack of sleep. "Someone's living in 6B. Mike shouted as soon as Peterson opened the door. The landlord's face drained of color. "That's not possible," he said flatly. "Show me the floor plan," Mike demanded. Peterson reluctantly pulled out the building's blueprint and spread it across his desk. Mike's finger traced along the second floor until he found his unit, 6A. But where 6B should have been, there was nothing. Just a solid wall. "This can't be right," Mike whispered. Peterson's voice was grave. "There is no Unit 6B, son. Never has been. Not since the building was constructed in 1972, Peterson finally relented under Mike's persistent questioning. "There was an incident," he admitted reluctantly, pulling out a yellowed newspaper clipping from his desk. "In 1973, a young mother and her infant lived in what would have been 6B. There was a fire. The mother saved the baby but suffered smoke inhalation. She died a few days later." Mike read the article with growing horror. The building had been renovated after the fire, the floor plan altered. What was once Unit 6B had been partially demolished and walled off. "Some say she never left," Peterson whispered. still singing to her baby on the other side. Mike moved out the next day, breaking his lease and forfeiting his security deposit. He told no one the real reason. Who would believe him? But sometimes, late at night in his new apartment across town, he wakes at exactly 3 a.m. And in those moments between sleep and wakefulness, he swears he can still hear it, faint but unmistakable, a woman softly singing lullabies. And sometimes when he's truly unlucky, he hears that raspy whisper again, "Don't wake the baby." So tell me, have you ever felt that something was off about where you live? Perhaps you should listen more carefully tonight. At 3 a.m., when the veil between worlds is thinnest,